She kissed me like I was her only man. But I wasn't even in her top 5. 9 months of love, plans, promises all gone in one text message. She knew I couldn't go back to my old life. That's what made it easy for her to leave. This isn't about a broken heart. It's about being used when you're most vulnerable. I didn't plan on telling this story tonight. Honestly, I thought I had buried it. But earlier today, I opened my email and saw a message from a longtime viewer of this channel. He wrote to me like an old friend, told me he's been watching for months, quietly sitting with these stories while living his own battles overseas. He said, "Your videos make me feel like I'm not alone in what I went through." And then he shared something personal, something raw, that hit me harder than I expected. At first I felt that familiar sting in my chest, the ache of recognition. Then came the anger, not at him, but at how many of us go through the same kind of betrayal and think we're the only ones. And after that, I felt gratitude. Gratitude that he trusted me enough to write, and gratitude that there's a whole community here that understands the weight of these experiences. It reminded me why I sit down night after night to put my story into words. So before I go any further, if you're here right now, if you've ever clicked on one of these videos, whether this is your first time or your 50th, thank you, truly. You don't know how much it means to me that you keep coming back, that you listen, that you share your own truths in the comments. This channel isn't just mine anymore, it's ours. If this story resonates with you, don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe, and tell me where you're watching from. I read those comments late at night, and they remind me just how far these words travel, how many lives they touch. So, thank you. From the bottom of my heart. Let me take you back to where it all started. I was sitting at that beachfront cafe, watching the sunrise paint Karen Beach gold, when everything in my life changed forever. The coffee was too sweet, my back ached from the 14-hour flight, but for the first time in 2 years, I felt something close to peace washing over me. This is it, I whispered to myself, breathing in the salt air. This is where I heal. I'd left Indiana with nothing but 2 battered suitcases and a retirement fund that would stretch twice as far in Thailand. The divorce papers were still crisp in my wallet, and the surgeon's warnings about my deteriorating spine echoed every morning when I struggled to stand up. At 59, I thought I was done with surprises, done with hoping for anything beyond quiet solitude. That's when she walked up to my table and changed everything. "I like your shirt," she said, pointing at my faded Indianapolis Colts jersey with a genuine smile that reached her eyes. "American football, right?" Her English was clear, almost musical, with just enough accent to be charming. I looked up and saw this beautiful Thai woman, maybe late 20s, with long black hair and the kind of smile that made you forget your own troubles. She was wearing the resort uniform but carried herself with grace, not like she was working but like she belonged everywhere. "You can sit if you want," I offered, gesturing to the empty chair across from me. She hesitated for just a moment, glancing around as if checking for disapproving eyes, then sat down gracefully. "I'm Nadia. I work here at the resort in guest relations." I extended my weathered hand. "Dennis Cole. I'm new here. Just moved from the States permanently." She shook it gently, her fingers small and surprisingly warm. "First time in Thailand?" she asked, tilting her head with what seemed like genuine curiosity. I nodded, suddenly feeling self-conscious about my age, my situation, my obvious status as another lonely American running away from something. Retirement plan. My doctor said the warm climate might help my back problems, and the cost of living made sense for my budget. She leaned forward slightly, her dark eyes showing real concern. "You're in pain often?" There was something in her voice, a softness that made me want to share more than I normally would with a stranger. "Not today," I said, surprising myself with the honesty. "This place feels like medicine already." She smiled again, broader this time, and I felt something shift inside my chest. Not attraction exactly, though she was undeniably beautiful. Something deeper, like recognition, like finding something I'd been searching for without knowing it. "Phuket is healing," she agreed, nodding as she looked out at the water. "I've lived here 5 years now, came from the Northeast, but I still watch the sunrise every morning before work. It reminds me that every day is a gift." We sat in comfortable silence for a moment, both staring at the endless blue horizon. The morning was still cool, peaceful, with just enough activity on the beach to feel alive without being overwhelming. Would you like to know the best places to watch the sunrise? She asked suddenly. The spots where tourists never think to go? I felt something inside me that had been closed for months starting to open. I'd like that very much. She glanced at her watch, then back at me. I finish my shift at 6 tonight. If you're free, meet me at the old fishing pier past the main beach. I'll show you the real Phuket. I nodded eagerly, already counting the hours until evening. I'll be there. As she stood to leave, she paused and looked back. Dennis, welcome to paradise. I hope you find what you're looking for here. You came, she said when I found her at the weathered fishing pier that evening, and her surprise seemed completely genuine, as if she'd expected me to forget or change my mind. Did you think I wouldn't? I asked, genuinely curious about her hesitation. She shrugged with a shy smile that made her look even younger. Foreign men, they sometimes just talk big during the day. Make promises they don't keep when evening comes. There was no accusation in her voice, just a matter-of-fact observation that made me wonder what experiences had taught her that lesson. We began walking along the water as the sun started its descent toward the horizon, painting everything in shades of orange and pink. Tell me about Indiana, she said as we found a quiet spot on some rocks overlooking the sea. What's it like there? I've never been to America. I found myself describing cornfields that stretched for miles, winter snow that covered everything in white silence, small towns where everyone knew your business whether you wanted them to or not. Sounds lonely, she said softly when I finished painting the picture of my old life. It was, I admitted, the words coming easier than they ever had before. Especially after my wife left 2 years ago. The house felt like a tomb, and every neighbor's pitying look just reminded me of what I'd lost. She stopped walking and turned to face me fully. I'm sorry, Dennis. Was it very painful? The divorce? I looked at her face, so open and caring, and felt words spilling out that I'd never said to anyone, not even my closest friends. She said I was boring, that I'd given up on dreaming, on living, on being the man she married 23 years earlier. The memory still stung, but somehow sharing it with Nadia under the Thai sunset made it feel less sharp. Maybe she was right. I was working 60-hour weeks driving truck, coming home exhausted, falling asleep in front of the TV. We stopped talking about anything real. Nadia frowned, her expression genuinely troubled. But you moved here. That's not boring. That's brave. Most people just complain about their lives but never change anything. Her words hit something deep inside me that I didn't even know needed healing. We found a small local restaurant where she insisted on ordering for both of us, laughing when I struggled with chopsticks and nearly dropped pad thai on my lap. Use a spoon, Dennis. It's perfectly acceptable. Even many Thai people use spoons. As we ate, she told me about her own journey. I grew up in Ubon Ratchathani, very poor, very rural. My father left when I was 12, so my mother raised 3 children alone. I came to Phuket 5 years ago with nothing but hope and 200 baht in my pocket. Her eyes took on a distant quality as she remembered. I have a sick mother still in the village. Heart problems, diabetes. That's why I work so hard, send money home every month. But someday I want to be a travel guide, show people the real Thailand, not just the tourist version. Her eyes lit up with genuine passion when she talked about her dreams, and I found myself leaning forward, captivated by her enthusiasm. What about you, Dennis? Now that you're free from your old life, what do you want? What are your dreams now? Free. No one had ever called my divorce that before. Everyone back home had treated it like a failure, a tragedy, something to be pitied, but the way she said it made it sound like liberation. I honestly don't know yet, I said, considering the question seriously. Maybe I just want to feel useful again, like I matter to someone, like my presence in the world makes some kind of difference. She reached across the table and touched my hand, her fingers warm and soft against my calloused skin. You make me feel comfortable, Dennis. Like I can say anything to you, and you won't judge me. I felt my heart skip a beat at the simple contact, at the trust in her voice. You can tell me anything, I said, meaning every word. I'm a good listener, even if I'm not much else. She squeezed my hand gently. You're more than you think you are. I can see it in your eyes. Over the next 3 weeks, we fell into a routine that felt natural and right. She'd finish work at 6, and I'd be waiting at our usual spot by the pier. She showed me hidden beaches where locals went to escape the tourist crowds, took me to markets where old Thai women sold the most incredible street food I'd ever tasted, led me to temples where tourists never ventured, and the incense smoke seemed to carry prayers directly to heaven. "This is where I come to pray," she said one afternoon, lighting 3 sticks of incense at a small shrine tucked between 2 buildings. "I pray for my mother's health, for my family's prosperity, for my own future." I watched her bow her head respectfully and felt something protective rise in my chest, something I hadn't felt since my marriage had been good. "What do you pray for?" she asked when she finished her ritual. "I don't really pray anymore," I admitted. "Lost the habit years ago, I guess. Maybe I should start again." She smiled, the same warm expression that had drawn me to her that first morning. "It's never too late to start believing in something again, Dennis. In hope, in love, in second chances." One evening, as we walked along a secluded stretch of beach, she stopped suddenly and turned to face me with a serious expression. "Dennis, I need to tell you something important." My heart clenched, immediately expecting rejection, expecting her to say this had been nice, but she was seeing someone else, someone younger, someone who made more sense. "I've never dated a foreign man before," she said carefully. "People will talk if they see us together. Some will say terrible things about me, about my motives." I studied her face, seeing real concern there, real vulnerability. "Are you worried about what people think?" I asked. She shook her head slowly. "I'm worried about what I think. About you, about us, about where this might go." "What do you think about me?" I asked, hardly daring to breathe. She looked up at me with those beautiful dark eyes, and I saw something there that made my chest tighten with hope. "I think you could break my heart," she whispered. "Or maybe I could break yours." The honesty in her voice, the fear mixed with possibility, made me reach for her hand. "Maybe we'll be careful with each other," I said. "Maybe we'll be lucky." "I found us a place," I told her 3 months later, holding out the keys to a 2-bedroom condo in Rawai with hands that were actually trembling with nervousness. "Us?" she asked, her eyes widening in what looked like genuine surprise mixed with something else I couldn't quite read. "If you want there to be an us," I said, suddenly feeling foolish for assuming, for moving so fast, for being a 59-year-old man acting like a teenager with his first crush. "I mean, you don't have to decide right now. You can think about it, see the place first." She threw her arms around my neck before I could finish babbling my insecurities. "I want there to be an us," she whispered against my ear, her breath warm and sweet. "I want that very much, Dennis." The day she moved in, she arrived at our new home with just one small wheeled suitcase and a canvas bag that looked like it had seen better days. "Is this everything you own?" I asked, genuinely surprised. Back in Indiana, it had taken me 3 trips with a rented truck to move my belongings, and I'd still left half my stuff behind. She shrugged with that same shy smile I'd come to love. "I don't need much to be happy, just you, and a place where we can build something together." Something in my chest melted completely at those words, at the simplicity of her contentment, at how little she asked for when she could have demanded so much more. She transformed our condo overnight in ways I never could have imagined. Fresh flowers appeared on the dining table every morning, their sweet fragrance filling the air. Thai cooking smells drifted from the kitchen, making the place feel alive and warm instead of sterile and temporary. She hung colorful sarongs as curtains, bringing brightness and personality to rooms that had felt like a hotel. "You don't have to do all this cooking for me," I told her the first morning as she prepared a breakfast of fresh fruit, rice, and some kind of spicy sausage I'd never tried before. "I can cook for myself. I'm not helpless. I want to take care of you," she said, placing the plate in front of me with obvious pride in her presentation. "My mother taught me that when you love someone, you show it through food, through making their life easier and more beautiful. A man should come home to warmth and comfort." I watched her move around the kitchen with such purpose, such natural grace, and felt grateful in a way I'd never experienced in my 23 years of marriage. My ex-wife had treated cooking like a chore, something to be rushed through or avoided entirely with takeout. But Nadia made it look like an art form, like an expression of love. "Nadia," I said, and she turned from the stove to look at me. "Thank you. For breakfast?" she asked with a puzzled smile. "For making me feel like I matter again. like I'm worth taking care of. The first month living together was like existing inside a dream I didn't want to wake up from. She'd massage my back with oil she bought at the local market when it ached after too much walking, her strong fingers working out knots I'd carried for years. She'd run baths with herbs that smelled like heaven and supposedly helped with inflammation. She even learned to make American-style coffee the way I liked it, strong and black, though she wrinkled her nose every time she smelled it brewing. "You spoil me," I told her one night as we lay in bed, her head on my chest, both of us listening to the rain on the roof. "Good," she said, tracing circles on my skin with her fingertip. "You deserve to be spoiled, Dennis. You've worked hard your whole life. Now it's time for someone to work hard for you." I'd started sleeping through the night for the first time in years. No more midnight back pain jolting me awake. No more racing thoughts about bills and loneliness and what my ex-wife might be doing with her new boyfriend. Just peace, with Nadia's warm body curled against mine, her steady breathing like a lullaby that carried me into dreamless sleep. I'd wake up naturally with the sunrise, feeling rested and grateful instead of tired and dreading another empty day. But sometimes, in those quiet moments when I thought she was asleep, I'd catch her staring at the ceiling with an expression I couldn't read. "What are you thinking about?" I'd ask softly, not wanting to startle her. "Nothing important," she'd always say, turning to kiss my cheek with practiced affection. "Just happy to be here with you." I wanted to believe her completely, needed to believe that her contentment was as real and simple as mine was becoming. "I love you, Nadia," I told her one morning as she prepared my coffee, the words spilling out before I could stop them or think about whether it was too soon. She froze for just a moment, her back still to me, the coffee pot suspended in midair. The pause felt like an eternity, and I immediately began second-guessing myself, wondering if I'd ruined everything by being too eager, too needy, too pathetically grateful for basic kindness. "I love you too, Dennis," she said finally, but she didn't turn around to face me when she said it. I told myself the hesitation meant nothing, that saying "I love you" for the first time was scary for everyone, that her English might make emotional expressions more difficult. But deep down, in a place I didn't want to acknowledge, a small voice whispered that something wasn't quite right about her reaction. I pushed that voice down, buried it under my desperate need to believe that this beautiful, caring woman had chosen me, had decided that a broken-down truck driver from Indiana was worth loving. I had to believe it. Without that belief, I had nothing left. "Dennis, can I ask you something difficult?" She was sitting on the edge of our bed, 6 months after moving in together, her hands twisted nervously in her lap, looking more vulnerable than I'd ever seen her. It was a Thursday evening, and I'd been reading one of the mystery novels I'd picked up at a used bookstore in Phuket town. "Of course you can ask me anything," I said, setting the book aside and giving her my full attention. "What's wrong? You look worried." She took a deep breath, as if gathering courage for something she didn't want to say. "My mother is having problems with her heart. The medicine she needs is very expensive, and I used all my savings to help with our rent and household expenses last month." She showed me a prescription written in Thai script that I couldn't read, along with what looked like a medical report with official stamps and signatures. "How expensive are we talking about?" I asked, already reaching for my wallet because the distress in her voice was breaking my heart. 2,000 baht. It's not a huge amount, but for my family it might as well be 1,000,000. Without this medicine, her condition will get worse. I pulled out 3,000 baht without hesitation, pressing the bills into her hands. "Take an extra 1,000 in case there are other things she needs, other expenses that come up." Her face lit up with such pure relief and gratitude that I felt like a hero, like Superman swooping in to save the day. "Thank you, Dennis. I promise I'll pay you back as soon as I can." "Don't even think about paying me back," I said, meaning every word. "Your family is my family now. That's what love means, right? Taking care of each other." 2 weeks later, it was her younger brother's motorbike. The engine completely died, and he needs it to get to his job at the rubber plantation, she explained, showing me photos on her phone of a serious-looking young man in mechanic's overalls standing next to a broken-down Honda. Without transportation, he'll lose his job, and he's the only one supporting his wife and baby daughter. The photos looked legitimate, the story made perfect sense, and her concern for her family's welfare seemed completely genuine. "How much does he need?" I asked, 5,000 baht for a rebuilt engine. But Dennis, I know it's a lot of money. If you can't afford it, I understand. I transferred the money that same afternoon through the local bank, watching her face light up as she called her brother to give him the good news. Your family is lucky to have you looking out for them, I told her as she hung up the phone. And I'm lucky to have you in my life, caring about the people I care about. She kissed me with such passionate gratitude that night, whispering thank you, between kisses, in a way that made me feel more like a man than I had in years. My friend Brian called from Indianapolis that week, one of his regular check-ins, to see how I was adjusting to life in paradise. How's Thailand treating you, brother? He asked, and I could hear children playing in the background at his house. Better than I ever deserved, I said honestly. I met someone very special. Her name is Nadia, and she's changed everything for me. There was a pause on the line that lasted just a beat too long. Thai girl? He asked, and something in his tone immediately put me on the defensive. She's a woman, not a girl. She's 27, works in hospitality, takes care of her family. She's wonderful, Brian. Another pause. Just be careful, Dennis. I've heard stories about those relationships. They can get expensive fast if you're not watching out for yourself. I bristled at the implication, at the assumption that Nadia was somehow using me. It's not like that with her. She's different. She cares about me, not my money. I'm sure she does, brother. I just want you to be smart about it. You've been hurt enough already. But the requests kept coming, each one more urgent than the last. Her cousin's wedding in Bangkok required a special dress and transportation costs. Her grandmother's funeral demanded money for the ceremony and food for mourning relatives. The family house needed a new roof before the rainy season, and her mother's medication dosage had been increased by the doctor. Each time, Nadia would approach me with genuine distress, showing me photos, translations of documents, proof that the need was real and immediate. Each time, I said yes without hesitation, feeling more connected to her world, more like a real part of her family. You're too good to me, Dennis, she'd say after each money transfer, usually while curled against my side in bed. I don't deserve someone who cares so much about my family. I'd hold her close, feeling needed and important and generous in ways that made me forget every warning Brian had given me. We take care of the people we love, I'd tell her. That's what families do for each other. Then one afternoon, she sat me down at our kitchen table with the most serious expression I'd ever seen on her beautiful face. Dennis, my family has found something incredible. There's land for sale near my village. Good fertile land that's been in another family for generations. They want to sell because they're moving to Bangkok. She showed me pictures on her phone of what looked like paradise green fields stretching toward mountains, a small stream running through the property, trees heavy with fruit. It's beautiful, I said, genuinely impressed. What would your family do with land like that? Build a house for my mother, somewhere she can live comfortably and close to medical care. Maybe grow crops we can sell, create some steady income for everyone. Her eyes were shining with excitement and possibility. How much are they asking for it? I asked, though part of me already knew this conversation was leading somewhere that would require my financial help. It's expensive. 200,000 baht. But Dennis, it's an investment in our future. We could visit there together, maybe even retire there someday when we're old. You could have a garden, I could take care of you. Our future. She said our future. In that moment, I could see it all spread out before us like a beautiful dream, a small house in rural Thailand. Nadia and me growing old together, surrounded by her grateful family, acceptance and belonging in a way I'd never experienced. I could picture myself tending vegetables, learning more Thai, becoming the respected foreign uncle who'd help save the family farm. Let's do it, I said without hesitation. Really? She gasped, throwing her arms around my neck. You'd really do that for my family? I'd do anything for our family. I corrected her, and she kissed me with tears of joy streaming down her cheeks. Over the next month, the land purchase became more complicated than either of us had expected. There was the down payment, of course, but then there were legal fees, surveying costs, and permits that needed to be obtained. The foundation for the house required materials and labor. There were utility connections to arrange, a well to dig, and countless other expenses that seemed to multiply every week. By the end of 2 months, I'd transferred nearly 400,000 baht, more than 11,000 US dollars, to various accounts related to the project. My retirement savings account was nearly half empty, but every time I looked at Nadia's happy face, every time she showed me new photos of construction progress, every time she talked about our future house where we'd grow old together, I felt rich beyond measure. "I can't wait for you to see it in person," she'd say, snuggled against me in bed. "Our home, Dennis. The place where we'll build our life together." Those words made every baht worth spending, every sacrifice worth making. I was investing in love, in family, in a future that finally made sense after so many years of emptiness. I found it crumpled in the bottom of our bathroom wastebasket on a Tuesday morning, partially hidden under tissues and cotton swabs, a napkin stained with deep crimson lipstick. My heart started racing for reasons I couldn't immediately understand. Nadia never wore red lipstick. In all our months together, I'd only seen her wear soft pink gloss or sometimes a coral shade that made her look sweet and natural. This red was bold, sophisticated, the kind of color that demanded attention and made a statement. I stared at that stained napkin for a long time, my mind racing through possible explanations while my gut churned with something that felt like dread. "Hey, Nadia," I called out, trying to keep my voice casual as I walked to the kitchen where she was preparing lunch. "Did you have friends over yesterday while I was at my medical appointment?" She looked up from chopping vegetables, her expression perfectly innocent and slightly curious. "Just Ploy came by for a quick lunch and to catch up on gossip." "Why do you ask?" I felt slightly foolish bringing it up, but something was nagging at me. "I just found some red lipstick on a napkin in the bathroom." "She wears red?" Nadia laughed, but the sound seemed forced, not quite reaching her eyes the way her genuine laughter usually did. "Oh yes, Ploy is very dramatic with her makeup, always trying new colors, new looks. She's much more adventurous than me with fashion and beauty." The explanation made perfect sense, and I felt my paranoia start to ease. "She sounds fun," I said, trying to smile away my suspicions. "Maybe I'll meet her sometime." "Maybe," Nadia said, but she was already turning back to her cooking, effectively ending the conversation. I pushed the incident out of my mind, chalking it up to the natural paranoia of a man who'd been cheated on before, who'd learned that trust was fragile and easily broken. But the next morning, Nadia was different in ways I couldn't quite pinpoint. She seemed distant, distracted, avoiding eye contact during breakfast and barely touching her food. She kept checking her phone, typing messages with unusual intensity, then putting it face down on the table when she noticed me watching. "Everything okay today?" I asked, reaching across to touch her hand. "You seem a million miles away." She pulled her hand back gently but definitively. "Just tired, Dennis. I didn't sleep well last night." But I'd been lying right next to her, and she'd seemed to sleep fine to me. "I need to run some errands today," she announced abruptly, already putting on her shoes and gathering her purse. "Girl stuff, shopping, you know how boring it is." I stood up from the breakfast table, suddenly feeling like I was being dismissed from my own home. "Want some company?" "I don't mind tagging along. Maybe we could have lunch somewhere nice." Her smile was quick and practiced, not the warm, genuine expression I'd grown to love. "No, it's really boring stuff. Better if you stay here and relax. I'll be back for dinner." She kissed my cheek with the kind of perfunctory affection you'd show a relative you were obligated to acknowledge, then left before I could respond. I spent that day alone in our condo, trying to read, trying to watch television, trying to convince myself that I was imagining problems where none existed. But something felt fundamentally different about Nadia's behavior, something that reminded me uncomfortably of the final months of my marriage, when my ex-wife had started pulling away emotionally long before she found the courage to ask for a divorce. When Nadia came home that evening, she seemed more like herself again, chattering about her day and showing interest in mine, but there was something rehearsed about her cheerfulness, like an actress who'd had time to prepare for her role. "How were your errands?" I asked over dinner, watching her face carefully for any tells. "Fine," she said with a bright smile. "Shopping, you know. Looked at some clothes, got my nails done, caught up with a few friends." But her nails looked exactly the same as they had that morning, and she hadn't brought home any shopping bags or purchases to show for a day spent running around town. I didn't challenge her directly, but I filed the discrepancies away in a growing folder of concerns. Over the next 2 weeks, the pattern repeated and intensified. Late returns with vague explanations about traffic or unexpected encounters with friends. Phone calls taken in the bathroom or on the balcony, always conducted in rapid Thai that I couldn't follow. A growing emotional distance that she tried to cover with extra enthusiasm during our conversations, but enthusiasm that felt forced and temporary. One night, I woke up at 2 a.m. to find her side of the bed empty and cold. I checked the time on my phone, then got up to look for her. I found her on our balcony, whispering intensely into her phone while looking out at the dark ocean. When she saw me through the sliding glass door, her eyes widened with what looked like panic, and she quickly ended the call. "Who was that?" I asked as she came back inside, trying to keep my voice gentle instead of accusatory. "My mother," she said without hesitation. "She's having trouble sleeping lately, worried about money and her health. She likes to talk when she can't rest. But her mother was supposed to be in the village, 3 hours ahead of our time zone. It would have been 5 a.m. there, an unlikely time for a social call from someone having trouble sleeping. Dennis, you're being paranoid," I told myself sternly as I lay in bed listening to her breathing return to normal. "She chose you. She lives with you. She tells you she loves you every day. You're letting your past poison your present." But Brian's warnings echoed in my head like a song I couldn't stop humming. I started noticing things I'd previously ignored or explained away, how she always placed her phone face down on surfaces, how she'd changed the subject smoothly whenever I asked specific questions about her day or her friends, how she'd grown cooler in bed, claiming exhaustion or headaches, when just months before she'd been passionate and affectionate. One afternoon, I decided to surprise her with lunch at the resort where she worked. I'd done it before early in our relationship, and she'd always seemed delighted to see me, proud to introduce me to her coworkers as her boyfriend. But when I asked for her at the front desk, the manager looked confused. "Nadia?" She requested this entire week off for personal reasons, said she had family obligations that required her attention. My hands started shaking as I walked back to my car. She'd left that very morning saying she had to work extra shifts to cover for a colleague who was sick. When I confronted her that evening, she was ready with an explanation that sounded perfectly reasonable and even touching. "I wanted to surprise you, Dennis. Next week is our 7-month anniversary, and I was planning something special to celebrate." She showed me a reservation confirmation on her phone for an expensive restaurant in Patong, the kind of place that required advance booking and cost more than most locals made in a week. "I wanted to work extra hours this week to pay for it myself, without asking you for money. I wanted to treat you for once, show you how much I appreciate everything you do for my family." I wanted to believe her explanation so desperately that I pushed down every instinct that was screaming warnings. The story made sense, showed thoughtfulness and independence, and explained both her secretive behavior and her request for time off work. "You don't need to spend your own money on expensive dinners," I told her, pulling her into my arms. "Just being with you is celebration enough." She melted against me with what felt like genuine relief, and I convinced myself that my suspicions had been unfounded, cruel even. But trust, once cracked, never quite fits back together the same way. The foundation of our relationship had shifted, and I could feel the wobble even when I tried to ignore it. I woke up to silence so complete and unnatural that my body went into immediate alert mode before my brain fully processed what was wrong. Nadia always woke before me, always had coffee brewing in the kitchen, always hummed Thai songs under her breath while she moved through her morning routine. But this Tuesday morning there was nothing. No sounds from the kitchen, no shower running, no gentle movement in the bed beside me. I rolled over, expecting to find her curled up asleep, maybe fighting off a cold or just unusually tired. Her side of the bed was not only empty but cold to the touch, as if no one had slept there at all. "Nadia?" I called out, my voice hoarse from sleep and growing anxiety. No answer echoed back from our small condo. I got up stiffly, my back protesting the sudden movement, and walked through our home room by room. The bathroom was empty, her toothbrush gone from the holder we'd shared for months. The bedroom closet was mostly bare, all her clothes missing, except for a few items I'd bought her that still hung forlornly on hangers. Even her favorite coffee mug, the blue one I'd found at a local market because she'd mentioned loving that particular shade, was nowhere to be found. It was as if she'd systematically erased every trace of her presence from our shared life. On the kitchen table, weighted down by the ceramic salt shaker we'd bought together at a weekend market, was a single piece of paper torn from a notebook. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely unfold it, and when I read the words written in her careful handwriting, I felt something break inside my chest that I didn't even know could break. Dennis, I'm sorry, but I have to go. I need something different in my life now. Please don't try to find me. It's better this way for both of us. Thank you for everything you did for me and my family. N. Thank you for everything. The words hit me like physical blows. Thank you for everything. As if I'd been a generous employer she was leaving for a better job opportunity, not a man who'd shared her bed for months, who'd fallen asleep holding her, who'd whispered, "I love you," into her hair on countless quiet mornings. I read the note again and again, searching for any hint of affection, any acknowledgement that what we'd shared had meant something to her, any suggestion that leaving me was causing her even a moment's pain. There was nothing. Just politeness and finality, as cold and clean as a business transaction being concluded. I grabbed my phone with trembling fingers and called her number, but it went straight to a recording in Thai that I couldn't understand. I tried texting her, typing and deleting messages that ranged from desperate pleas to angry demands for explanation. Every message came back undelivered. I checked our messaging apps, hoping to find some trace of our relationship, some record of the thousands of sweet messages we'd exchanged. Everything was deleted. Our entire digital history together had been wiped clean, as if it had never existed at all. Then I remembered our joint savings account, the one we'd opened 3 months earlier for our future together, the account where I'd been depositing money for our shared expenses and long-term plans. With hands that wouldn't stop shaking, I logged into the banking app on my phone, praying that my worst fears wouldn't be confirmed. The balance showed zero. Not just empty, completely drained. Over 1,400,000 baht, nearly $40,000 gone without a trace. Money I'd saved from years of truck driving, money meant to secure our future, money I'd trusted her with because I believed we were building something permanent together. I sat down hard on our kitchen floor, the same floor where she'd danced while cooking dinner just days before, and felt something fundamental break inside me that went far beyond heartbreak. This wasn't just losing someone I loved. This was discovering that everything I thought I'd known about the last 9 months of my life had been a carefully constructed lie. Had any of it been real? The gentle touches when my back ached, the whispered, "I love you" in the dark, the way she'd curl against me and talk about our future together, had she been acting the entire time? I thought about every conversation we'd had about the land purchase, every photo she'd shown me of construction progress, every excited discussion about the house we'd build for her mother. Had there ever been any land? Was there even a sick mother? Or had that been another carefully crafted detail designed to make me feel needed and generous? The realization that I might have been nothing more than a mark in an elaborate con game made me physically ill. I ran to the bathroom and threw up until there was nothing left in my stomach but bile and betrayal. The worst part wasn't even the money, devastating as that loss was to my retirement security. The worst part was how easily she'd done it, how little hesitation there had been in her decision to destroy me. No tearful goodbye, no explanation, no acknowledgement that she was ending not just our relationship but my ability to trust anyone ever again. Just a polite note thanking me for my service, as if I'd been a useful appliance that had served its purpose and could now be discarded without a second thought. I called the local police, though part of me already knew it would be pointless. The officer who took my report looked bored and unsympathetic, clearly having heard variations of this story countless times before. "Happens all the time," he said with a shrug that made me want to hit him. "Foreign men, Thai women, money disappears. Did you give her access to your accounts willingly?" When I nodded, he shook his head with pity that felt more like contempt. "Then there's no crime here. Just bad judgment." I wanted to scream at him that this was different, that what Nadia and I had shared was real love, not some sordid transaction, but the words died in my throat because I was no longer sure of anything I'd believed about us. That night, I lay in our bed that now felt enormous and cold, staring at the ceiling and replaying every moment of our relationship with new eyes. Had she practiced that shy smile before approaching me at the cafe? Had she researched lonely foreign retirees, learning exactly what to say to make us feel special and chosen? When she'd told me I made her feel safe, when she'd shared her dreams of becoming a tour guide, when she'd cried with joy about the land purchase, had any of those emotions been genuine, or had she simply been a better actress than I was an audience? The cruelest realization was that I'd ignored obvious warning signs because I'd needed so desperately to believe I was lovable again. I'd seen what I wanted to see, heard what I needed to hear, felt what my lonely heart was dying to feel. In my desperation to matter to someone again, I'd handed over not just my money but my judgment, my instincts, my sense of reality. She hadn't really stolen those things from me, I'd given them to her willingly, eagerly, gratefully. I was a victim, but I was also a collaborator in my own destruction. I spent the next 3 days moving through our condo, like a ghost haunting his own life, touching objects she'd touched, sitting in places where we'd shared conversations that now felt like elaborate performances. The blue coffee mug I'd bought her because she said it was her favorite color, had she even liked blue, or had that been calculated to make me feel special for noticing? The Thai cookbook we'd bought together at a weekend market so she could teach me her grandmother's recipes. Had there ever been a grandmother? Or had that been another carefully crafted lie designed to make me feel included in her family history? I found myself obsessively examining the photograph I'd framed and placed on our bedroom dresser, the one taken at the temple where she'd taught me about making offerings and saying prayers. We were both smiling at the camera, her head resting on my shoulder, looking for all the world like a couple genuinely in love. But now when I looked at that photo, all I could see was the slight distance in her eyes, the way her smile never quite reached them, the subtle tension in her posture that suggested she was performing rather than simply being happy. I replayed every "I love you" she'd ever said, searching my memory for cracks in her performance, for moments when the mask might have slipped. "I love you too, Dennis," she'd whispered the very night before she disappeared, right after I'd confirmed the final transfer for what she'd claimed were unexpected construction costs for our house. Had she been calculating in that moment exactly how much more she could extract before making her exit? Had she been planning her disappearance, even as she pressed her body against mine and made promises about our future together? The woman who'd massaged my aching back with such apparent tenderness, who'd learned exactly how I liked my morning coffee, who'd listened to my stories about Indiana with what seemed like genuine interest, had any of that caring been real? Or had she simply been studying me like a scientist observing a lab rat, learning my weaknesses and needs so she could exploit them more effectively? The thought that every intimate moment we'd shared might have been calculated manipulation made me feel physically sick. I drove to the resort where we'd first met, desperately hoping someone there could tell me where she'd gone, or at least confirm that our relationship had been real in some way. The morning shift manager looked at me with confusion when I mentioned Nadia's name. "There's no one here by that name," she said, checking her employee records. "I've been managing this department for 8 months." I described her in detail, showed photos on my phone from our early dates. "Oh, you mean Sam," the manager exclaimed with recognition. "She worked here briefly, maybe 4 months total. Nice girl, but she quit suddenly last month. Said she was moving to Bangkok to start a new life." Sam. Even her name had been a lie from our very first conversation. I felt like someone had reached into my chest and yanked out everything I'd believed about the last 9 months of my life. "Do you know where in Bangkok she went?" I asked, hearing the desperation in my own voice. "Or how I might contact her?" The manager shrugged with the casual indifference of someone who'd probably seen dozens of similar situations. She didn't leave any forwarding information, but she seemed very excited about whatever opportunity was waiting for her there. Said she was finally going to have the life she deserved, a new life. The phrase echoed in my head like a taunt. While I'd been planning our life together, buying land for our retirement, imagining growing old with her in rural Thailand, she'd been busy constructing her escape route and her next identity. I wondered if there was already another lonely foreign man in Bangkok, some other recently divorced retiree who thought he'd found love with a sweet, innocent Thai woman who just needed a little help with family emergencies. I sat in the cafe where she'd first approached me, where she'd complimented my Indianapolis Colts jersey and asked to sit down, where I'd foolishly believed that someone that beautiful and kind had chosen me for who I was rather than what I could provide. The new girl working behind the counter was probably the same age as Nadia, with the same sweet smile and respectful manner. I watched her interact with customers and wondered if she was genuine or if I'd simply lost the ability to trust my own perceptions about anyone. The cruelest realization was understanding how perfectly she'd played her role. Never too eager, never too obvious about wanting my money. She'd let me chase her, let me feel like I was winning her over through my own charm and persistence. She'd shared just enough vulnerability to make me feel needed, just enough dreams about our future to make me feel invested in her happiness. When she'd finally started asking for financial help, she'd seemed almost reluctant, making me insist on being generous, making me feel like a hero rather than a mark. Even her requests for money had been brilliantly escalated. First small amounts for genuine-seeming emergencies, then larger sums for family crises, finally the massive investment in land and construction that had cleaned out my savings. Each transaction had been accompanied by gratitude so intense it felt like love, by physical affection that made me feel valued, by conversations about our shared future that made every sacrifice seem worthwhile. She'd made me feel like I was investing in love rather than being systematically robbed. 3 weeks after Nadia disappeared, I was drinking alone at a beachside bar in Kata when another American sat down on the stool beside me. He was about my age, maybe a few years older, with the same shell-shocked expression I'd been wearing since finding that note on my kitchen table. His eyes had the hollow look of someone who'd recently had his reality shattered, and something about his defeated posture told me we'd probably shared similar experiences in this tropical paradise that promised healing but sometimes delivered devastation instead. "You look like a man with a story," he said after ordering a whiskey neat, his Midwest accent immediately familiar and comforting. "Thai woman?" I nodded without surprise, having learned over the past few weeks that my situation was apparently common enough to be recognizable to strangers. "Let me guess," he continued with bitter accuracy that made my skin crawl. "Sweet, innocent, perfect English, worked at a resort or restaurant. Started with small emergencies, sick mother, broken motorbike, family wedding expenses. Then came the big one, land purchase, house construction, investment in your shared future together." My blood turned cold as he described my relationship with Nadia in such precise detail that he might have been reading from her script. "How did you know all that?" I asked, though I was already starting to understand the horrible truth about just how unoriginal my experience had been. He laughed, but there was no humor in it, just the kind of bitter recognition that comes from discovering you've been played by professionals. "Because I lived it, brother. Exact same script, different actress. Her name was Porn, at least that's what she told me when we met 6 months ago. Said she was from Ubon Ratchathani, worked at a hotel in Patong, had dreams of opening her own tour guide business. 8 months of what I thought was love, $60,000 of my retirement money, and then one morning I woke up to an empty bed and a cleaned-out bank account." He showed me photos on his phone of a different woman who nonetheless looked disturbingly similar to Nadia, same age range, same sweet smile, same innocent beauty that would make any lonely foreign man feel lucky and chosen. As he told me his story, the parallels became increasingly horrifying. The same sick mother with heart problems requiring expensive medication. The same family land opportunity that required immediate investment before other buyers swooped in. The same construction delays and unexpected costs that drained his savings over several months. Even the same sudden disappearance with nothing but a polite note thanking him for everything he'd done for her family. "The worst part," he said, taking a long drink, "is finding out later that you weren't even special. You were just next in line, another number in someone else's business plan." He told me about the support group he'd discovered online. Dozens of Western men who'd had nearly identical experiences with Thai women who seemed to be working from the same playbook. "There's a whole network of them," he explained. "They share information, techniques, even the same fake documents and photos. That land you bought in her village? I guarantee it either doesn't exist or belongs to someone who has no idea their property is being sold to multiple foreign suckers. That sick mother with the heart condition? She's probably healthy as a horse, if she exists at all." The revelation that I'd been part of a systematic operation rather than a unique relationship was simultaneously devastating and oddly liberating. I wasn't some particularly gullible fool who'd been singled out for his stupidity. I was just another victim of a well-organized scam that had probably been refined through dozens or hundreds of previous operations. "How long did it take you to stop feeling like an idiot?" I asked. "About 3 months after she left," he said. "I kept asking myself what I'd done wrong, why I wasn't good enough to keep her, whether I could have changed something to make her stay. Then I realized I was asking the wrong questions entirely." He leaned closer, his voice taking on the tone of someone sharing hard-won wisdom. "It wasn't about you not being enough, Dennis. It was about you being exactly enough money to make the con worthwhile, enough loneliness to make you vulnerable, enough hope to keep you investing long after any rational person would have walked away. You weren't chosen because you were special. You were chosen because you were perfect for what they needed. We talked until the bar closed, comparing notes like soldiers sharing war stories from the same brutal campaign. He told me about the private investigator he'd hired to find porn, the dead ends and fake addresses, the discovery that even her workplace had no record of anyone matching her description. "You won't find her," he said as we prepared to leave. "And honestly, you don't want to. Finding her won't give you closure or answers or your money back. The only thing that will help you heal is accepting that it happened and deciding who you want to be now that it's over." As I walked back to my empty condo, his words echoing in my head, I realized he was absolutely right. I'd been searching for closure from someone who'd never given me truth in the first place. I needed to stop asking why Nadia had left me and start asking who Dennis Cole was going to be now that she was gone. The hardest truth to accept was that I'd ignored obvious warning signs because I'd wanted so desperately to be loved again. I'd seen what I wanted to see, heard what I needed to hear, felt what my lonely heart was dying to feel. In my desperation to matter to someone again, I'd handed over not just my money but my judgment, my instincts, my sense of self. But that realization also meant I had the power to take those things back. Nadia or Som, or whatever her real name was, had stolen my money and my trust, but she couldn't steal my strength or my capacity to learn from this experience. She'd taught me that I was still capable of loving someone, still able to hope for a future with another person, still willing to be vulnerable and generous. Those weren't weaknesses to be ashamed of, they were the qualities that made me human, that made life worth living, even when they sometimes led to pain. I moved out of our condo 4 months after Nadia disappeared, unable to bear another day of living surrounded by memories that might have been nothing but performances. Every room held echoes of conversations that now felt like lies. Every surface reminded me of objects she'd touched with hands that had been calculating my worth, even as they pretended to offer affection. I found a simple bungalow near Naiharn Beach. Nothing fancy or romantic, just a clean, honest space where I could start rebuilding my sense of self without the constant reminder of how thoroughly I'd been deceived. The first morning I woke up alone in my new place. I made my own coffee in my own kitchen using my own mug. It was terrible, bitter, and weak because I'd forgotten how to operate a coffee maker without someone else handling the details, but it was honest in a way that nothing had been honest for months. There were no hidden agendas in that bad coffee, no ulterior motives, no calculations about how much longer I'd be useful. Just me, learning to take care of myself again, one small task at a time. I started walking Naiharn Beach every morning at sunrise, partly for the exercise my back needed, and partly because I'd discovered that physical movement helped quiet the angry voices in my head. The beach was usually empty at that hour except for a few dedicated joggers and the occasional fisherman checking nets left overnight. I wasn't walking to share romantic moments or impress anyone with my commitment to fitness. I was walking to remember who Dennis Cole had been before he'd defined himself entirely through someone else's eyes, before he'd made another person's approval the center of his universe. My back still ached most mornings, especially when the weather was changing or I'd slept wrong on my new mattress. But I was managing the pain myself now, stretching, taking over-the-counter medications, using heat pads I bought at the local pharmacy. No one massaged away the knots in my shoulders or ran herbal baths to ease the inflammation. But also no one was mentally calculating the cost of their care, wondering how much longer they'd need to pretend to worry about my comfort before they could cash out and disappear. Brian called from Indianapolis one afternoon, about 6 months after I'd moved into the bungalow. "How you holding up, brother?" he asked, and I could hear genuine concern in his voice, rather than the "I told you so" smugness I'd been dreading. "Getting there," I said, surprised to realize I actually meant it. "You sound different, Dennis. Clearer, maybe? Like you've got your feet under you again." He was right, I did sound different, because I was different. I'd been forced to learn who I was when I wasn't trying to be what someone else needed me to be. I'd started cooking simple Thai dishes, not because someone was teaching me their family recipes, but because I wanted to understand and appreciate the culture I'd chosen to live in. I bought ingredients at local markets, struggled through conversations with vendors who spoke limited English, made mistakes that sometimes resulted in inedible disasters but always taught me something new. I joined a meditation group at a nearby temple, not to impress anyone with my spiritual growth, But because I'd discovered that silence and mindfulness helped heal the parts of me that constant analysis and worry had damaged, most surprisingly, I'd started volunteering at a local animal shelter, helping care for dogs that had been abandoned or abused. The work was often heartbreaking, seeing animals that had been hurt by the people they'd trusted most, but it was also incredibly rewarding to watch them slowly learn to trust again. We understood each other, those dogs and I. We'd both given our hearts to someone who'd ultimately betrayed that trust, but we were both still capable of hope, still able to find joy in simple pleasures like sunlight and food and gentle human contact. Sometimes other expats would see me at bars or restaurants and ask about my romantic life with the kind of knowing grins that made me want to hit them. "Ready to get back out there, Dennis?" they'd say with presumptuous familiarity. Plenty of fish in the sea, especially here in paradise. But I wasn't fishing anymore, wasn't hunting for someone to complete me or validate my worth as a man. I was learning to be content with my own company, to find value in my own thoughts and interests, to trust my own instincts about people and situations. When asked directly about my experience, I'd share my story without shame or self-pity, not seeking sympathy but offering warning to anyone who might be walking the same path I'd walked. Don't hand someone your future just because they hold your hand for a few months, I'd tell them. Make them earn your trust gradually, and pay attention to what they do, not just what they say. Love shouldn't cost you your life savings or your sense of reality. The money was gone forever, and I'd made peace with that reality. My retirement fund was significantly smaller, my financial future less secure, but my present was authentic in a way it hadn't been during those 9 months of beautiful deception. I knew exactly where I stood financially, emotionally, and socially, because I was standing on my own 2 feet without illusions or pretty lies propping me up. I'd learned to budget more carefully, to live more modestly, to find pleasure in simple experiences that didn't require anyone else's participation or approval. I still thought about her sometimes, not with longing but with a kind of detached curiosity. I wondered if she'd found her next target in Bangkok, some other recently divorced retiree who thought he'd gotten lucky with a beautiful young woman who seemed to choose him over all the other foreign men competing for Thai women's attention. I wondered if she ever thought about me or if I'd been completely forgotten the moment she'd moved on to her next project. The wondering used to hurt in a way that felt like physical pain. Now it was just idle speculation, like wondering about the weather in distant cities where I'd never lived. More importantly, I'd learned to distinguish between loneliness and solitude. Loneliness was what I'd felt in Indiana after my divorce, that desperate ache for someone to validate my existence and make me feel valuable again. Solitude was what I'd discovered in my bungalow near the beach, the peaceful satisfaction of enjoying my own company, of not needing anyone else's approval to feel complete. I could still appreciate companionship when it was offered honestly, but I no longer needed it like a drowning man needs a life preserver. The sunrise was particularly spectacular that morning as I finished my walk and headed back to make my still terrible but honest coffee. I'd survived betrayal, financial devastation, and the complete destruction of my faith in my own judgment. I'd learned that love could be weaponized, that kindness could be calculated, that the person sharing your bed might be counting down the days until they could disappear with everything you'd saved for your future. But I'd also learned that I was stronger than I'd known, more resilient than I'd believed, still capable of finding beauty and meaning in life even after losing everything I'd thought I needed to be happy. She'd taken my money and my trust, but she couldn't steal my capacity for growth, my ability to learn from devastating mistakes, my willingness to help other people avoid the same trap I'd fallen into. Those qualities were mine to keep and develop, regardless of who came into my life or left it. As I unlocked my front door and prepared to start another day of building a life based on truth rather than illusion, I realized I was exactly where I needed to be. Not where I'd planned to be when I'd first moved to Thailand, but where life's hardest lessons had taught me I belonged. Alone but not lonely, careful but not closed off to possibility, wiser but not bitter, ready for whatever came next, but only on my own terms, with my eyes wide open and my heart protected by the hard-won knowledge that the most important relationship I'd ever have was the one with myself. And that relationship, unlike the beautiful lie I'd shared with Nadia, was built on a foundation of truth that no one could take away from me.